They hop freights, and in so doing, dozens of them are killed or crippled. They hitchhike. They beg and steal and fight one another. They are half-starved, scantily dressed, susceptible to diseases brought on by malnutrition and exposure. They ought to be in warm and comfortable homes. They ought to be in school. Instead, they are struggling through an icy winter, lucky if they are able to stay alive from one day to another. Here in Omaha this afternoon, police were summoned to a dilapidated barn just outside the city limits where the high winds that accompanied today's severe rainstorm caused a wall to collapse, pinning a 14-year-old youth under a heavy oak beam. The boy was hospitalized as soon as he was removed from the wreckage. Doctors say his condition is critical. Of the other 8 children who had spent the last 3 days in the barn, 5 were found to be suffering from varying degrees of malnutrition. 2 of them are 12-year-old cousins who say their home is in Des Moines, Iowa. Another's a 10-year-old boy from Chicago who looked, as one newsman put it, like a half-famished angel with a shock of blonde hair and an old banjo which he clutched in lieu of a harp. I don't think that I made a sound, but I felt a scream inside me. Lonnie said, my God, it's Joey. It has to be Joey." Dimly, after a minute, I began to hear the words from the radio again. "Arouse the compassion of many citizens of Omaha who tonight have opened their homes to these desperately needy children. A few of the wild boys of the road are in good hands tonight, but they are only a few. Hundreds of others are out in the fields, on the highways, in the poorer sections of towns and cities. They are raiding garbage cans. They are burning anything they can find in any effort to keep warm. Not since the Crusades have so many children suffered so cruelly. And this is the United States of America in the year of our Lord, 1933. Lonnie was pulling on his coat. "I'll go to the radio station, see what they know. They can surely tell me what people to contact next. I'll find them. I'll find that boy if it takes all night, all week." "Let me go with you, Lonnie," I begged. "Don't be a fool, Josh." His voice was harsh. "Do you think I want you going into a relapse when we don't know what to expect about Joey? You stay right here. I've got enough to worry about." He hurried outside, and through the din made by the rain, we heard the sound of his old car as it sputtered into action. Janie put her hand on my arm. "He's all worked up, Josh. He was like this the night we found you. He almost took my head off when I asked him a few questions about you that night." I sat down, suddenly very tired. "We're causing him trouble and expense. We're making him worry. I hate to think about it," I said. She sat down beside me on the bench behind the stove, and we clasped hands. Somehow it seemed the natural thing to do. The room was shadowy in the lamplight. "Do you want me to talk or be quiet?" Janie asked. "Be quiet," I answered. "Do you want me to stay here or go over home and leave you alone?" "No, I want you to stay here. I want you very much, Janie. Just stay here like this." She nodded, and we sat there for a long time, close to one another without moving. Grandma came over later to iron the shirts in a big laundry basket which Lonnie had carried in for her earlier, the work that gave her a chance to earn a little money to help with expenses. I thought Grandma might not like it that Janie and I were sitting together with our hands clasped, but she seemed to feel it was all right. She said to Janie, "It's like when we had our Davy with us. You'd sit there behind the stove holding each other by the hand. Do you remember?" Janie nodded and smiled at the deaf old woman. Then she turned to me. "She's right, you know. Davy and I used to sit like this, especially if one or both of us had been scolded. We'd just sit here holding each other's hand and staring in front of us. Lonnie and Aunt Helen used to say it was unnerving. I think, unoccasionally, we meant it to be that way. You liked him a lot, didn't you?" "I adored him. He was just enough older to make me feel that whatever he did was right. Anything, of course, that didn't interfere with me. We fought once in a while. Not often, but when we did, it was a bloody fight." We didn't say anything more. I watched Grandma take a hot flat iron from the stove and push it slowly back and forth along a white shirt sleeve, making little inroads at the top of the cuff, pressing slowly and heavily across the cuff itself. The rain continued to beat against the windows, stubbornly persisting. I thought long after you'd think there couldn't be any more water to come down. It seemed Lonnie had been gone an age. I wondered what could have happened. I wondered if it could have been a mistake, if by some cruel chance there could have been another boy from Chicago who was clutching an old banjo. We waited hour after hour. At 9, Janie remembered that we hadn't had supper, and so she filled bowls with soup, and the 3 of us ate a little. At 10, she and Grandma hung the long rows of shirts, each on its separate hanger, in Lonnie's bedroom, ready to be packed and delivered the next day. Then Grandma drew a shawl around her shoulders and motioned to Janie. "We must go, honey. It might be late before Uncle Lonnie gets home. You have to get to bed." She came over and, to my surprise, bent and kissed my forehead. "My prayers have been for your little brother ever since you came, Josh. Tonight they will be the same," she said. It was strange that I had never thought of her as being grim. When they were gone, I walked around the room a dozen times or more, stopping at the window to look out into the night, going back to the bench where Janie and I had sat together. After a while, I began to tremble. I didn't think it was with cold, but I put more coal on the fire. I didn't think it was with cold, but I put more coal on the fire anyway and drew a blanket around my shoulders. I mustn't get sick again, I thought. Lonnie has had enough trouble in taking care of me. I've got to get to take some responsibility for myself. I've got to keep well and take care of Joey. A car turned into the driveway finally and stopped as near the kitchen door as the driver could maneuver it. I stood at the window, shaking, trying to see out into the darkness. I found myself saying, "Please, please," through my chattering teeth. Then I heard Lonnie at the door, and I threw it open for him. He came inside carrying Joey in his arms. "I have a young man here who says he's acquainted with you, Josh." Lonnie's voice was cheerful, consciously so, I realized. He put Joey down in the big armchair and drew aside a layer of blankets, revealing a terribly thin little boy, dressed in warm, clean pajamas, his feet tucked in woolly, white slippers. He didn't quite look like Joey, except for the big gray eyes and the mass of blonde hair that fell around his face. There are patterns of behavior that people of a certain age, a certain sex, a certain condition must follow. A 15-year-old boy cannot take a 10-year-old brother in his arms, as a mother might do. He cannot say the things that are deep inside him, cannot express his love and relief, his bitter remorse. The pattern of behavior toward a younger brother by a 15-year-old does not allow these things. Joey would have recognized this. He understood patterns very well. And I simply held out my hand. "Hi, Joey," I said. He grinned ever so slightly. That grin belonged to the Joey of other days. He said, "Hi, Josh. It's sure good to see you." We shook hands. I ducked my head a little so that he wouldn't know that I was crying. Tears were not in the pattern either.